Oh, hello everyone. Dr. Judy here of Dr. Judy WTF, and I still have this beautiful Aurora Borealis behind me. And why is that so? Because I am a computer nerd and I do not know how to turn it off. So there we have it. Next time, I guess I can get tech support to help. But in the meantime, I'll go with it because it is a beautiful Aurora Borealis, and the world is hopefully a better place because we as individuals can contribute more light to the world. And that's the only way I know how to make our current life and our future life and the next generation more beautiful. So today we're going to get into a subject matter on trust versus mistrust and all the Ericksonian stages of development. And the episode is called Arrested Development and Chaos. So chaos is, as you will find out more about, is a can be a byproduct of arrested development. And so I want to hear from everyone. I want to hear how everyone is doing, given what we are also going through, a lot of chaos, the pandemic, and then all of the peaceful protests and the not so peaceful protests, and how this is affecting everyone and how this is triggering all kinds of reactions in people. And the amygdala is pretty much being very activated. So let's talk a little bit about arrested development. So here's an article by Rufus. And it starts by saying that some of us look grown up, but we aren't. So inside of you is all kinds of levels of your stages and ages. So there's the 2-year-old you and the 7-year-old you and the 12-year-old you. And some of us make it past that stage of development. And we'll get into what actually arrests stages of development. But in the meantime, I want to talk about the fact that just because you look grown up, it doesn't mean that you have been able to pass the developmental milestones that lead to the next step of maturity and development. Psychological development mostly is what I'm talking about. And this leads to a lot of problems later in life, obviously impacts people financially and impacts people's parenting skills and impacts a lot of different aspects of life. So back to the article, we walk around with suits and briefcases and car keys and annuities and what else? But inside we're 5, 10, 12, 16. We sit in boardrooms, travel the world, even write books, but we're kids still playing dress up. So this is not, this is an article that's just directly pointing to the reveal that it doesn't mean anything if you're lugging around a big briefcase or you're driving a car and you're supposed to be obviously driving age. But then what about the internal development? And this is a call-in show, everyone. So please do call in. That number to call in to is, I think it's up there. I can't see it right now, but it is up there. So please look at the screen. Oh, 323-524-2599. Thank you so much. And I welcome your calls. I want to talk about ages and stages of development. And I want to start by going through the mind map, and then I'll talk a little bit more about Erickson and his stages of development that he describes. And so this is sort of like my developmental model right here in the form of a mind map. And it's a from, through, to model. So let's apply arrested development and psychological development in general to the mind map and see what happens here. So panel number 1 represents our childhood and what happens in that area. And if we are lucky enough to have parents that mirror us, parents that attune to us, parents that are there for us, if we're fortunate enough to be from an intact family, well, this will do a lot for moving us properly through the developmental stage of life. If we are not lucky enough to have the mirroring and the attunement and the safety and so far, if we are subject to childhood wounds such as neglect, physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, smothering and controlling, then it will injure us and it'll block our psychological development. If you look at panel number 2, actually 1 and 2 and 3 represents the first few years of life. So there's the developmental model. We are born into a family. We're either supported by the light of that family or we're blocked in development by the shadows of treatment. And then we react to all of this. Our amygdalas become fight or flight or freeze or fawn mode. And we cannot escape our childhood. I like to refer to childhood as a hostage situation. And then what we do is we encode all of the injuries or all of our strengths, on the other hand, into panel number 3. And this encoding can go either way. And again, this is not either or, but this is usually our families give us both the darkness and the light. So this is, again, it's not either or. So you can see by panel 3, by now we've encoded a lot of messages into the fiber of our being. Messages like you're good enough, or you're not good enough, or you're lovable, or you're not lovable, or the world is a safe place, or it isn't a safe place. And if the world isn't a safe place, then we will not have the proper internal psychological core to keep building a self and keep growing and maturing and separating and individuating from our family of origin. I think we have a call in, so I'll pick up from Hi.
Hi, so this is Sonia.
I'll wait till that horrible noise subsides. Okay. Okay, hi, and what is your name, please? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we lost him.
Okay, please call back. What is that horrible noise? I wish it were not buzzing like that, but is there anything you could do tech support wise to
It was from the caller, so.
Oh, it's from the caller. Okay, so either she'll call back or somebody will call back. But can you see the progression that if things go well, then what happens out of the light of your family and the safety of your family and the structure of your family and the positive support of your family is that you learn how to regulate your emotions as opposed to just being a reactor. Calms down your amygdala, your limbic system, and then you start building a sense of self in panel 3, where the fiber of your being is supported by the structure of attunement and mirroring and helping you develop and eventually separate and individuate from the family. And I do want to mention something that I like to mention quite often is that healthy dependence forms healthy independence. So a lot of parents are too eager to help their children become independent too soon. And by that, I mean, they may expect too much from them at certain developmental stages, or they may choose to not parent them as much as the child needs to be parented at any given stage. And so this does not progress the development of the child. This actually helps to arrest the development of a child and keep them stuck in certain ages and stages, much like what this article is saying, is the person looks like they're a fully grown person, they look like they're ready to be doctor, lawyer, whatever they're doing, but then inside they're really not structured psychologically to hold the maturity, because life requires of us to act in mature ways. And what I mean by that is that we need to have some basic psychological skills for life. We have to know how to basically arrive on time, and we have to be well enough groomed so that we don't turn other people off. We have to have a style of dialogue that is connecting enough as opposed to disconnecting and alienating. We have to have behaviors that are inviting other people to feel comfortable around those behaviors. And if we don't have those general adult mature skills, then we're not going to be related to very well. We won't make particularly good parents and role models, and we won't be particularly skilled at being a partner, whether it be a business partner or friendship or a marital partner. And so you can see how important the foundational is to building a fully developed and fully mature person. So let's go on with this article. And they say that, that as a result of this arrested development, what happens is that we become flighty or scatterbrained or irresponsible or illogical or impatient, a lot of ims here, and we're immature. We are stuck in the past, not by choice, but because we have not had the support necessary to grow up. So why is that so? Because our traumas hold us back. And what kind of traumas hold us back? Like the ones I mentioned. If you're physically abused, if you're emotionally abused, if you're sexually abused, if you're neglected or controlled and smothered and not respected, well, obviously that's going to have a great impact on the way that you develop. I want to talk a little bit about arrested development and going to the root cause of this. And so you can see through the mind map's eyes that the root cause is directed back at the blueprint, which is always mom and dad and multi-generations. And by mom and dad, I mean primary caregivers. And if those people are not acting in a mature way, if they have arrested development, then they cannot help grow you and develop you. So that's problematic because children rely on their parents to help them mature. So here is an article on arrested psychological development. You may be younger than you look, psychologically speaking. So the article says the roots of arrested development are from the past traumas or disturbances in childhood. So this article and I concur there. Adolescence or teens family of origin, specifically to problems in the parent-child relationship and early childhood development, which, as you know, I talk a lot about narcissism and narcissistic injuries. And so when a parent puts their own needs before a child, then the child cannot feel like they are important enough and wanted enough and special enough. And this is going to take the development of the healthy development, and it will start to bend in another direction, in a more pathological direction. And out of that will lots of things can happen. The child can become identified with the parent and lack empathy, or the child might become so injured that they will do anything to hold on to toxic bonds and then end up in toxic relationships. So the outcomes are certainly different. And I do want to hear from you. I hope that the call-in line works and that it can connect to me and a conversation, because I think this is a very, very important topic. And in light of everything that is happening in the world, you could see that people who are not fully formed, people whose amygdalas are firing off, people who are in emotional reactivity are not necessarily acting out of a calm, logical, well thought out of place. And so that's why it's so important that people get the psychological nutrients, as I like to call it, so that they can be off to a really strong start. And if you didn't get those psychological nutrients and you're acting out or acting out is when you explode on others, acting in is when you do self-harm. If you're going in that direction or the other direction, there is still a lot of hope, because part of the work at the Psychological Healing Center is to take you through the stages of development and remove the obstacles and the psychological poisons that are keeping you stuck so that you can start to flow and develop. I love to see this happen. It's so beautiful for me to watch people who've been stuck in certain ages and stages, and then as they get the support and the mirroring and the attunement and the enlightened witness aspect of therapy, they can then start to think properly, as opposed to think with a cracked lens of perception, as I like to call it. And then when they start to think properly and their emotions are calmed down and supported, they can make better cognitive, better rational choices for themselves. Arrested development is being stuck at an emotional level of development, depending on the timing of the trauma. So think about developing, and then boom, you're hit with the trauma, something significant happens or something significant doesn't happen, and it paralyzes you. And then you're stuck there. And then you, as the other article says, you put on your big boy or big girl clothes and you go to your big boy and big girl job, but inside you're angry, you're acting like a brat, or you're spilling all of your childhood injuries onto the coworker or the employees. And this goes on, and I talk a lot about this. It's called projection, because when we're not psychologically calm and balanced, we tend to want to get rid of the pain. And a very, very common way to get rid of pain, which I see all the time in my practice, people telling me how much their parents or their siblings or their spouses project and vomit all their feelings all over them. And they don't understand why. They just plain, why is my mother talking to me like that? Or why is my husband treating me like that? Or why is my wife treating me like this? And very often it's because they don't have the maturity, they don't have the developmental process and the development. They're not in a good developmental stage to meet you in an adult place. Many years ago, there was a form of looking at the therapeutic system through the lens of transactional analysis. And transactional analysis, I think, was a very interesting model because it talked about the parent and the adult and the child. And so the therapist would say, well, okay, you're having an adult to adult conversation, or you're having a parent to a child conversation, or you're having a child to child conversation. And so in a mature person, you're kind of able to switch roles. You can be a parent at the right time, and you can be a mature adult at the right time, and you can even be a playful, imaginative, inquisitive child at the right time. And sometimes it's just fun to regress to those places. I love to regress to those places, especially with my grandson or my animals or certain friends that I feel safe with. And that's not what I mean by immature. Okay, that's not what I call arrested development. It's just that some people can't get out of that place. So even though life requires for them to now be a parent or now be an adult, they're still living in that same zone. And that becomes problematic. because that leads to a lot of chaos. And you can imagine you're looking at somebody, they look all grown up and they look very powerful. And some people are in their own power in their profession, but yet they don't know how to self-reflect. They don't know how to self-correct. They don't know how to have peaceful conversations. They don't know how to empathize with another human being. And these are all signs of development gone right. When you have empathy, communication skills, when you can put your feelings aside for another human being, that's where the two people can meet and interconnect and exchange and grow. And so arrested development, instead of creating growth, creates chaos, defenses, and breakdowns. So if you look at panel number 4, 5, 6, you can see that panel 4 is a metaphor for the chaos, and those DNA strands that are unraveling are metaphors for a system that is busted, a family system that's busted, a societal system that's busted. And people are, as you can see in the diagram, hurling off into space. And so what are they supposed to do? So they curl up in a little ball. Panel number 5, they become defensive, and then they lock themselves into psychological prison. And that would be defense mechanisms. And then they are arrested in this psychological prison. They don't want to go out because it's not safe. So they may be stuck in there. They may be stuck in certain defense mechanisms like using drugs, alcohol, which is a drug also. They may be overeating in that little psychological prison. They may be isolating from other people. They may be watching porn or playing on their computer. And there are all kinds of ways. It's just that when we don't allow for any of the light to come in, we can't grow. It's impossible to grow. So if you're in your ism and you're locked down and you don't start taking a look at how you got there, which is the cause. Okay, we're going back to the cause again, and why you're in your ism, and what else you can do to allow your boundaries to be flexible enough. Let's talk about boundaries for a minute and development, because you can't develop a healthy self if you've been violated. So if you've been violated, whether it be sexually or physically or any which way, then you're going to wall yourself up and you don't want to let anything in. But this doesn't work in the long run, because what happens out of that is that people won't let the good in either. It works both ways. So the good can't come in. Great, the bad can't come in, but then the good can't come in either. And then we get stuck and we're arrested in our development. So please call in. I want to hear from you. I want to hear from the people who know where they're stuck and why they're stuck, or maybe you don't know why you're stuck and where you're stuck, and we can find out a little bit more about that and mind map it. And certainly people who want to learn more can get a free copy of my book, my PDF copy, and I'm very happy to take the call. So hi, what is your name, please?
My name is Manya.
Hi, Manya. How are you? We've talked before, have we not?
Yes, we have. It's just a very different topic tonight, and I really felt to call in.
Thank you. Appreciate you calling in. And how do you relate to the topic of arrested development and chaos?
Well, I feel like I'm in a very chaotic point in my life. My fiance, well, we were engaged a very long time, almost 20 years, but he passed away 3 weeks ago.
Oh my God,
and
I'm so sorry.
I know, and it's just been, I have never, my mother passed away a year ago of the same illness that he died of, in the same hospital, on the same floor. But this was even worse. Like, I am reeling, and I've done an enormous amount of work, but I'm frightened by it. I feel like I've gone into chaos. And I came from a very chaotic childhood, but I've done an enormous amount of work. I've been extremely motivated since I was a child. I basically lived in the library, you know, reading books on all of these kind of existential subjects and therapeutic subjects. But this one, it just has thrown me back to the point I feel like, have I really done any work at all? He was a beautiful soul, but like my mother, he was a compulsive eater, and they both became diabetic and died of you know, those horrendous diabetic-related, deaths from obesity and heart condition, everything that comes from it, eh?
Well, that's a different kind of chaos, is it not? As you know, the mind.
It's a different kind. I'm more self-controlled. Like I think I have slightly more rigid boundaries than what's healthy, and more controlling. Especially since he's died, I just find myself trying to control everything because I feel everything is so out of control in me.
Right. And to go back to your original question, which I think was something like, does that mean that I really haven't done the work? You know, I'm a woman who does all this
Yeah.
for myself. And so whenever we are traumatized or re-traumatized by such a severe life event like a death, okay, a divorce, a car accident, some violent event, something that really is above our supposed ability to process the emotions, it will regress us. Everyone regresses to an earlier stage of development. And that doesn't mean that you haven't done the work, because you've already shown that you have surpassed those milestones. But right now, you're thrown back. Like literally your emotions are thrown back, because it's natural that when we're hurt, we want to go back to the womb. We want to go back to our mommy, daddy, protect us. And your mother's deceased. Is your father around?
My father was killed in active service, so my mom was pregnant with me, and she never recovered from that. But I had a wonderful great-grandmother. We lived a traditional family, multi-generationally.
You're from Canada, aren't you?
So I am.
Where are you calling from?
Yeah, I'm from Manitoba.
Manitoba.
Portage La Prairie.
Okay, Manitoba. All right. Yeah, is it flat? The flatlands, yes?
It is. It's very flat.
Okay. So look, you are now so traumatized, and on top of it, you have a blueprint of a mother who could never metabolize the death of your father.
No, and she was a diagnosed narcissist. Like that was she was formally diagnosed with narcissism. So it was a very complicated relationship.
So look at all these.
I mean, I took really good care of her. I was the caregiver for her always, and I took really good care of her. We never actually had an argument. She may have had explosive rages, but no, I never raised my voice to my mother or anything like that. No.
So look, you've been the caregiver. You had a narcissistic mother. Your father died early, and so look at your blueprint. You didn't have a structure or a foundation of mirroring and attunement and support and so on. And the fact that you've done so much work on yourself shows, because you're able to contain your feelings and act in mature ways when you need to. And sometimes you may contain your feelings too well and then implode, which is why you have to continue to do the work. And so this death cannot do anything but have a huge impact on you and hurl you back into that earlier stage, emotional stage. But I'm reminding you that doesn't mean that you're going to be stuck there, okay? Because you've already flowed through that. Understood?
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Because
Yeah.
that's been my concern, that I'm stuck here for good.
Yep.
Because I really don't feel functional. I just don't. I mean, I push myself.
Come on, you're grieving. You're grieving. And I don't know if you had a chance.
Oh, I'm so grieving.
Of course you're grieving. And I don't know if you had a chance to grieve your father. Maybe you were too young. I don't even know if you had a chance to grieve your mother. And not only grieve your mother, but grieve the mother that you never had, because she doesn't sound like she was very motherly. Okay, so you call.
No, she wasn't at all. She was like a rebellious teenager.
Okay.
And even my sweetheart, my beautiful fiance, we were engaged for almost 20 years, but you know, I mean, he's an elder, a traditional Native elder, First Nations, and but you know, his home life, he found it very hard to be intimate. Of course, he went through all of the terrible things that people go through in residential school, from age 4 to 17.
Yep. Okay. Okay. And I had, remember, I'm now blanking on the name, but I did a show on, I hope I pronounce it correctly, the Ojibwa.
He was an Ojibwe elder, yes.
Thank you, Ojibwe elder. Okay. And so now that we're so conscious of racism and so on, and all of our isms, that part of what arrests us as human beings is that when we're not supported in our being, okay, when we're not supported for who we are, whatever race we may be, if we don't feel supported by that, that can leave us with a huge cultural injury. So speaking of arrested development, we must take cultural issues into consideration, because they too are wounding, and they too arrest our development and block us from manifesting the best of our best. And so I don't know what his blueprint was like, but I do know that that the cultural racism against his family was huge, and must have impacted him.
Well,
must have.
Oh, I mean, he was of course sexually abused and tortured in residential school starting at age of 4. He had scars all over his body from, you know, the electrocutions and things they did for the little kids who wet their bed. They tortured them, because he was only 4 when he went there, so he started wetting his bed. So that's what they did. When they would wet, they would electrocute them, right?
Oh,
they had wires
God.
And the thing is that I just don't know. I feel so traumatized by it, and I feel like I'm going crazy because I keep looking for him and wondering where he is, you know? Like, I don't know, maybe that's part of it.
And also knowing how much torture he went through in a lifetime, and knowing that he maybe through the years that you were with him, he was able to find love and comfort, and we don't know how much internal turmoil he still lived with as a result of the torture.
Huge amount.
Yeah, so he was.
There's pieces I couldn't reach. Yeah.
Right, and so he was in his own psychological prison. And speaking of bedwetting, that is a perfect example of arrested development, because, as you know, when people are sexually abused, when they're electrocuted, if they're tortured this way, then it will arrest their development. So I've had patients who are 18 years old and they're still wetting their bed. Why? Because we discover that there was some sort of a sexual molestation going on, or some sort of an interference with the development. So it is so interesting that the body keeps the score. And so I tend to look at things from a developmental point of view, and I tend to look at things from a kind of like a psychological detective point of view, so that when I'm seeing a lot of symptoms, and I like to connect the dots back to what happened to you, who did this to you, where did you get stuck, where did you freeze over? Okay, and these are examples of arrested development. Now, are you arrested development? Probably you're traumatized by your fiance's death and still reeling from an incomplete relationship with your mother where you were the giver and she was the taker, that narcissistic dynamic. I suggest, if you haven't already, please listen to that YouTube episode I created called The Herder Can't Be the Healer. That's a good one for
Yeah,
you.
absolutely. I've listened to it like 3 times. It's very powerful.
Okay,
And I've done the Mind Map series, and it was a game changer for me. I bought the video.
Okay, all right, and thank you for that.
Changed my life. I'm much better than I was, but I'm much worse also, just because I just feel that I've been catapulted, and I see the arrested development. I've always felt it in me, but I work on it. But with my beloved, him going into the hospital, even as a grown man,
Yes.
he immediately became terrified, and he couldn't speak up like to the doctors when they would do things that necessarily weren't helpful.
Sure.
He got discharged during COVID. I got COVID, but he got discharged so that he would, when he was supposed to be getting a dialysis port, and they discharged him.
Didn't you call in right after?
Pardon me?
Didn't you call me while you were recovering from COVID?
I did, and he was alive and well then. Yeah.
Thank God. Are you okay?
You know what? I don't know why I never got my energy back, but it knocked the fluff out of me. Yeah. Okay. I got my breathing back. That took quite a while, but my energy levels are so low even before he passed. It's only been almost 3 weeks since he died, eh?
Well, listen, this is going to mess with your autoimmune system. You've already been compromised. And so now when we experience severe loss, again, we're compromised. Our bodies have reactions to this. That's not what I call arrested development. Arrested development is where you're just stuck and you don't grow, and you act immature in the sense that you don't assume responsibility, and you act in a way where you're not able to self-reflect and self-correct. So you're constantly projecting, constantly destroying, constantly demeaning, whether it's demeaning people or property, or breaking relationships. And so these are signs, cues that the development didn't go very well at all. In your case, look, you're still grieving. And there's one other episode that I want you to watch called Grieving the Parent You Never Had. So what I mean by that—
I'll find it.
Yeah, please find it. For those of you who want to know more about why I created it, is because a lot of people will call their mother mom or their father dad. It's just that the mother and the father didn't act like parents, and they shifted the system 180 degrees. So when they pass, you're grieving the mother, but then listen to the video. I define what a mother is, okay? And these people who acted injured, narcissistic, self-serving, were not acting like parents. So even that you're grieving a mother that you didn't really have. So I'd love you to watch that video because you'll understand. So
I definitely will. But yeah. I think someplace I am like arrested is I've been in the same relationships with the same people since I was 4 years old, okay. Both male and female chums, mm-hmm. And so 54 years I've been in the same relationships. But I kind of am beginning to notice for the first time is that they're all kind of takers, and I don't really know like how to change that. But it's not now. I kind of hit a bottom with this, and yet nobody calls. Even when I ask them, please call me once in a while and just to talk to me because I'm really grieving. But they don't do it. Like they just don't keep their word with me and stuff. My friends.
So this is a very difficult juncture because as we grow, and as you know, doing the mind map and the video, you're growing and you can see now more the narcissism of people. You're recognizing empathy and lack thereof, and yet you have a history with these people, you have a friendship with these people, especially now, and I don't recommend that you particularly break off old friendships. Now would not be a good time unless they're just horrible people. It's just that,
no, they're not.
This is one of the downsides to doing the work and evolving is the more that we evolve, the more we'll notice other people's lack of development and lack of skills and lack of empathy in particular. And it hurts and it leaves the person growing feeling rather isolated. So that's why it's so important to surround yourself with people who are also on a growth path. It's very, very important. So if you're in an arrested developmental stage and you're acting out or acting in, and people have said, oh my God, you're just a chaotic mess. You're so immature. Get your act together. Why are you always so late? How come you can't keep a job? How come you oversleep to all your, these are indicators, okay? They're just some indicators. There are many others, of course. But if you find yourself in that spot, then understand that you are not the cause of part one of your life. However, you're the cause of part two of your life. And this is where you can jump in and start identifying these wounds of childhood that kept you stuck. And instead of being good old pals with your inner child that's keeping you from getting a job or from getting you a relationship, you could just have a little talk with your inner child and say, you know what? You are keeping me too stuck. I just can't entertain you. I'm moving on. I'm moving ahead. And that's where you start seeking help. And that's where you start developing. But in this case, I definitely wouldn't be too worried that you're an arrested development type person.
Well, I feel really much better about that because I've been really scared thinking that I'm never going to recover, that I really hadn't gotten anywhere because I'm usually like a person to be like a half an hour before work, a half an hour before appointments. Yeah. And people are even telling me like within days of his death, there was, one particular girlfriend of 54 years was saying, you already told that story. Don't tell me that story again. Like, because I guess I'd already told her the story about, what happened when he passed away,
Well, you have to tell it over and over because that's how we complete things. Remember the Freud, especially with grieving, sometimes you have to tell your grief story many times over. And that's why certain cultures, certain religions have ceremonies and support systems and days where they gather as families. And, nobody says, oh, I already heard about that. Oh, yeah, I heard how sick he was. Yeah, I heard about that. Nobody does that. They just shut up and know that the person has to say it over and over and over. And that a lot of people are going to have to just sit and listen and empathize. And this is your time. This is your time to say it over and over and over if you need to. Okay. And hopefully to people who can attune to you and mirror you, because that's how we jump the program ahead. So remember, what is arrested development and chaos is that you don't have a foundational. Why don't you have a foundational? Because you don't have a blueprint. Why don't you have a blueprint? Because your parents multi-generationally didn't have a blueprint and they too were wounded, whether it be a combination of cultural wounds and physical and neglect and smothering and sexual or over controlling. All of these things arrest our development. So I'm just going to take a moment, and you're welcome to stay on, and then you can say maybe where you thought you were stuck and now where you're not so stuck. But I want to go through Erik Erikson. Okay. He was a psychologist, developmental psychologist from 1902 to 1994. Dr. Erik Erikson, the 8 psychosocial stages of human development. Well, stage 1, trust versus mistrust. That takes place around 0 to 18 months. So if trust has been broken, not a good outcome, because instead of feeling secure and securely attached and feeling that the world is safe, you're off to a bad start. You feel that the world is not dependable. You feel that that you're not protected. You feel that things are not consistent, and so already foundationally there is a puncturing. I call it the hole in the soul starts to develop. Next stage is a stage called autonomy versus shame and doubt. And that's between, let's say, past 18 months to before 3. So this is the time when children are toilet trained, and the challenge is that they gain control of their system. And the outcome is if they're successful and supported, as opposed to electrocuted when they urinate in bed, wow, I'm not going to be getting that out of my mind anytime. Develop a sense of personal control over their physical skills and a sense of independence. Potty training plays an important role in helping children develop this sense of autonomy. Success during this stage leads to feeling autonomous. Failure results in feelings of shame and doubt. So imagine what your fiance felt as a result of not being able to control his bladder and being shamed for not being able to control his bladder and being electrocuted. This is beyond. Stage 3, preschoolers, 3 to 5 years. There's a sense of exploration. If you don't pass through this stage of initiative versus guilt, going out, taking initiative, then what's supposed to happen is in a successful developmental process, you begin asserting control and power over the environment. And if they don't pass this, it results in a sense of guilt as opposed to a sense of purpose. Then the next stage, 6 to 11, industry versus inferiority. So now the child is in school, and the outcome is supposed to be new social and academic skill development, and these demands are supposed to be enough to not overwhelm, but not too little so that they don't develop skills. Success leads to competence, and failure results in inferiority. So you see that if you don't pass through these stages and you get stuck here, then you don't, it's like that ladder in panel number 8. I'm going to use it as a metaphor. You're evolving up the ladder of development, and instead of arrested development, you're climbing. Why do you climb? Because you get support. Who do you get the support from? Hopefully your primary caregivers and other people who you choose to affiliate later on with. So by 12 to 18 years, you're trying to understand, who am I? Who am I? What is my role in life? If you don't pass this one, then you're basically stuck in a phase of not knowing where you fit and who you are. And then I won't go into all of them. I'll briefly. 18 to 40, intimacy versus isolation. This is where you form the loving relationships. But imagine if you were stuck in age, initiative versus guilt, or trust versus mistrust. How are you supposed to form loving, trusting relationships if you were injured at such a young causal level? And then by 40 and 65, hopefully you're feeling that your contribution to the world, that you're generating, and that you have useful accomplishments that you can share with other people. Failure to pass through this stage results in a shallow involvement with the world, not in contribution. And then the last stage, 65 to death, integrity versus despair. So how are you supposed to have a last stage of development where you feel like you are in integrity and you reflect well on life, and that you don't have regrets, and that you feel that you've contributed to the world? So do you see how important it is to go through this developmental process? And if it's arrested, it just doesn't bode well. So I thank you for staying on. What do you think? Where do you think you were stuck in? What phase of development? Just if you were to guess at it, what was the first thing
Well,
you were
the
doing?
two that most resonated for me,
Yeah.
the two that most resonated for me was insecurely attached at from 0 to 18
Yeah.
months.
Yeah.
And also 6 to 11, the social and educational skill development. I was very socially awkward because I was bullied at home, and therefore it made me like awkward, and I was unkempt as far as things that I didn't know, like my hair wouldn't be brushed, my clothes would be tattered, and it made me a scapegoat. So I think it affected both my social skills for kind of created an awkwardness.
Yes.
And I think the insecurely attached is something that comes up with a kind of an existential anxiety that I deal with.
So your mother didn't even have the emotional maturity, because she was arrested in her development, to put her daughter together in a neat, clean way where she was presented.
No.
Cool.
No, not at all. No.
Okay, so what's it supposed to do to your self-esteem, right? And I was just having this conversation with one of my patients today about ADD, and one of the ways that I look at ADD and the inability to concentrate, let's say in school, is that when you're busy licking your emotional wounds, and you're busy feeling low self-esteem and wondering if other children like you and so on, and worrying about your clothes or your presentation, it's really hard to concentrate. It's impossible to concentrate.
Yeah, it really is. And I wasn't so much even self-conscious about the clothes or whatever. I didn't know why. I didn't know why they were bullying me, but it was quite constant. And I think I was one of the only Aboriginal kids. I was a mixed blood, but obviously Aboriginal in a white school. And that in itself made for a sense of people maybe treating me less than human.
Yes. Yeah, and for your mother to not buffer you against this, I don't know if she couldn't buffer you, and just sounds like she...
No, she was very sadistic. In her narcissism, she leaned heavily towards a kind of a very disturbing sadism,
Well, obviously you had nothing but a not good start, okay? And for you to have grabbed onto healing and the mind map, and going through the video of the mind map, which is not an easy process, by the way. You can do it alone.
No, it isn't.
It's best to get some support around it if you can. And
yeah,
you have a beautiful team of people who can help with the support around that. But it's not an easy process, because you've got to go back to those childhood wounds, and that's not fun. And then you've got to break down and understand what those negative core beliefs are. And that's appalling to know that you've been living with these feelings of not lovable and not mattering, and not feeling like you're important enough, and so on and so forth. And if the list goes on, and so these kinds of things are what makes us not able to continue to grow. And so you did it. You went through it, and you confronted yourself, and you used a tool that was not exactly an easy tool to use to get you to this place. So I honestly, back to your original question, I just don't think, with all the work that you've done, that you're still in an arrested place. I think you're in a traumatized place. Okay. And so,
Yeah, well, thank you. No, it was actually a tremendous relief. The whole mind map series, like there was moments where I was deeply uncomfortable. Like even my body, I felt like getting sick to my stomach with some of the things that came up as I was working on it. But overall, the entire experience of the mind map was a tremendous relief. And I did also the group with Yitz Epstein, and it was amazing. But I am going to do, when I'm in a better financial place, I'm going to do the series with a one-on-one therapist with your group.
I would love you to do that, just to clean up any.
Oh, I'm going to. It's my gift to me as soon as I'm into just a better place. Right now, I mean, obviously, with him being so sick and me being sick, and then my mother being sick, it just left me in a place where I have to be extremely hardworking to dig myself out financially.
Okay. Well, again, my sympathies to you regarding the loss of your fiance. It's very, very traumatic. And so allow yourself to be a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 3-year-old, and whatever year old, because I know that at the end of the day, you're still going to eat, and you're still going to show up on time, and you're still going to do whatever adult duties you have to do to get through your day. I'm not concerned about that.
Okay, well, I'm really glad to hear. It makes me feel like what I'm going through is so much more normal when it feels so unbelievably out of control and unpredictable.
Yes. Yes. So I'm so glad to hear from you again. And I'm so sorry that you're going through this. And you've been through so much. You survived COVID. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I got to say it's the sickest I ever felt in my life, and it was terrifying. I didn't to not get my breath, but yeah, I mean, there's so many things that we can look on the other side of it and say, I don't know how I got through that. I mean, that's the sickest I've ever been. It was horrible. Yeah.
Well, thank you for reminding everyone to please wear a mask and be extra.
Be careful. Do everything you can. Watch your nutrition. Do everything, because you don't want to go through that.
No. So thank you so much, and I'm gonna take a minute to Shrink a Tune by Hall & Oates, and I'm sure I'll hear from you.
Okay, and thank you for walking me through the did you call it Erickson? That was very good.
Oh,
very helpful.
Dr.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, good night.
Yeah, that was really helpful.
Contribution. Okay, so just for the last couple minutes here, I'm going to Shrink a Tune by Hall & Oates, an old one. Crazy Eyes lyrics. Pardon the crazy way I behave and the things I say, because if I'm acting kind of strange, I'm looking through crazy eyes. I look at that as the cracked lens of perception. Everything's all right. Oh, I'm just looking at you through crazy eyes tonight, because if I'm acting kind of strange, I'm looking through crazy eyes. Everything seems to have changed. I don't even know my name. I wish I could place the blame on someone, but there's no one. Everything's all right. And then the crazy eyes, because I'm acting kind of strange. Everything's all right. There's a lot of redundancy about this song. I picked it because of the cracked lens of perception. And when things are not right, we tend to look through our lens through crazy eyes. And when our childhood injuries crack our lens of perception, it arrests our development, and then we go crazy because we're not supported and we're not mirrored and attuned to, and then we resort to age 2-year-old behavior and 3 and 5 and all kinds of acting in and acting out and projecting on other people and self-harm, and we still have opportunity to go through the healing of those arrested stages of development, and you don't have to be stuck there. So thank you so much, everyone, for listening, and I will see you next week. Good night, everyone.